In the 1960s, while the world raced to the moon, two men looked to the Earth and set out to break the sound barrier on land. Out on the vast, empty salt flats of Utah, Craig Breedlove and Art Arfons pushed jet-powered cars to their absolute limits and turned the desert into a battleground. Their goal was simple: either to reach 600 miles per hour or die trying. So who won this rivalry? But first, to understand how this rivalry began, we need to start with who they were. Because this wasn't just about machines, it was about the men behind them and the fire that made them chase the impossible. So Craig Breedlove came from the sun-soaked streets of Southern California. He started as a teenage hot rodder, but he had bigger dreams than the drag strip. With a background in aerospace and a head full of streamlined designs, Breedlove wasn't just building a car. He was building a rocket on wheels. He had charm, vision, and connections. Goodyear signed on as a sponsor, making him the first land speed racer to bring big money into the game. His name was in newspapers, his car was on TV, and the media couldn't get enough of it. To the world, he was the golden boy of speed, moving to Art Arfons. He didn't have a wind tunnel or a big budget sponsor. He had a garage in Akron, Ohio, a welding torch, and a pile of scrap. Arfons was a World War II vet and a self-taught genius who made things work, even if they didn't look pretty. He scoured military surplus yards, bought a jet engine for a few $100, and bolted it to a frame he built with his bare hands. He then named it the Green Monster. If Breedlove was the polished professional, Arfons was the wild card, tough, stubborn, and fearless. Where Breedlove used engineers, Arfons used instinct. Where Breedlove had polish, Arfons had grit. One was all precision and planning. The other was trial and error, brute force, and sheer will. Together, they were setting the stage for one of the most intense rivalries in motorsport history. At the heart of this battle were two machines unlike anything the world had ever seen. Craig Breedlove's creation was called the Spirit of America. It looked like it had fallen from the sky because, in a way, it had. Long and narrow, 34 feet from nose to tail, it was shaped more like a jet fighter than a car. And that was no accident. Under the skin was a GEJ-79 jet engine, the same kind used in F-4 Phantom fighter planes. It produced over 15,000 pounds of thrust and could push the car to insane speeds. Breedlove's team engineered every fine detail, from the aerodynamics to the braking systems. The early version had 3 wheels, but by 1964, it evolved into the 4-wheeled Spirit of America, Sonic Eye, a lean surgical machine built to shatter records. It was sleek, it was high-tech, and it was built to win. On the other hand, Art Arfons went a different route. His Green Monster also ran on a GEJ-79 engine, but the similarities stopped there. Arfons built the car himself in his garage, using scavenged parts and whatever metal he could find. The cockpit was hand-welded. The controls were custom-rigged. It wasn't that pretty, but it worked, and it was fast enough to break records. The whole thing cost less than $10,000 to build. It didn't look like it belonged on the salt flats. But once that engine fired up and the afterburner kicked in, it moved like nothing else. So while Breedlove had engineers, Arfons had a wrench and a blowtorch. But what they shared was a hunger for glory and speed. And their cars might seem different, but had one thing in common. They were dangerous, barely controllable, and built to defy death. So the war for speed officially began in 1963. Craig Breedlove was the first to strike. At Bonneville, his Spirit of America hit 407.45 miles per hour, making him the first person to ever drive a land vehicle past 400. Cameras rolled, headlines screamed, and he became an instant celebrity. But the celebration didn't last long. A year later, Art Arfons rolled onto the same salt with a new version of the Green Monster. It looked rough, but it was fast. In 1964, Arfons shattered Breedlove's record with a run of 434 miles per hour. It was no longer just about speed. It now became personal. So Breedlove answered fast and hard. In October of that same year, he launched Spirit of America. Sonic eyed down the Salt Flats and pushed it to 526.28 miles per hour. But something went wrong. The parachutes failed, and the brakes couldn't slow him. The car skidded more than 5 miles, flew off the course, and plunged into a saltwater lake. Miraculously, he climbed out unharmed. 3 weeks later, Arfons returned. He hit 536.71 miles per hour. Once again, he took the record and pushed the stakes even higher. By late 1965, the Rivalry had become an all-out arms race. Breedlove brought back a rebuilt Sonic Eye, sleeker, faster, and more stable. And Arfons returned with a Green Monster that looked even more like a missile than a car. Neither man was backing down. Each run wasn't just a test of speed anymore. It was a test of nerves. The desert echoed with the roar of jet engines. It was only a matter of time before someone hit a number the world had never seen. The world was watching two men push the boundaries of physics and sanity. As the speeds climbed, so did the risk. In 1964, Craig Breedlove's luck nearly ran out. On a run topping 500 miles per hour, his braking parachute failed. The car lost control and skidded across the salt at terrifying speed. Again, Breedlove emerged completely unharmed. Later, he would joke, "We ran out of road." But the truth was no joke. He had just survived a crash that should have killed him. Then, in 1966, it was Arfons' turn to face the edge. Mid-run, at over 610 miles per hour, something snapped. A suspected wheel bearing failed, and in seconds, the body of the Green Monster tore apart. And yet, somehow, Arfons also crawled from the wreckage, dazed but alive. It was nothing less than a miracle. These weren't just accidents. They were proof of how far each man was willing to go, not just to break records, but to break the other's will. Because this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about pride, obsession, and the need to be faster no matter the cost. To most people, surviving a 600-mile-per-hour crash would be a reason to quit. But Breedlove and Arfons weren't like most people. Even after these accidents, their rivalry didn't slow down. It only grew more intense. Crashes that would have ended ordinary lives barely left a scratch on their determination. For these two men, speed wasn't just a goal. It was their purpose and obsession. It was their way of life. Enjoying the ride so far? You're just one click away from joining the fastest growing pit crew on YouTube. Subscribe now. By the fall of 1965, their rivalry had reached its boiling point. On November 2nd, Craig Breedlove pushed Spirit of America, Sonic Eye, to 555 miles per hour. The mark didn't stand long. Just 5 days later, Arfons answered with his fastest run ever at 576.55 miles per hour. But neither of them was finished yet. On November 15th, Breedlove returned to the Salt Flats for what would become a defining moment in land speed history. The first run clocked in at 593.178 miles per hour. The return run, just hours later, hit a staggering 608.201. The official average was 600.601 miles per hour. Finally, Craig Breedlove had done it. He became the first person to drive a wheeled vehicle over 600 miles per hour, not in theory or in a lab, but on Earth, on salt. The barrier was broken. The crew erupted, and the cameras rolled in at Craig as he achieved his mission. And for a moment, the desert was silent, stunned by what had just happened. That moment wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. Proof that the line between possible and impossible could be redrawn, not with luck, but with courage, calculation, and sheer nerve. It was history in motion, and everyone who saw it knew they had just witnessed something that wouldn't be forgotten. Art Arfons, his forever competitor, looked on. But this time, he didn't suit up. He didn't fire up the green monster. He simply said, "That's enough." It wasn't just a number. It was a threshold, a line very few dared to cross. And Craig Breedlove didn't just win the race. He etched his name into history forever. So the rivalry between Craig Breedlove and Art Arfons was short, fierce, and unforgettable. But its impact stretched far beyond the salt. It inspired engineers, racers, and dreamers around the world. Breedlove's 600.601 miles per hour record stood for 5 years. This number once seemed impossible, but Breedlove made it possible. In 1970, the Blue Flame rocket car, driven by Gary Gablish, finally eclipsed it, reaching 622.407 miles per hour. But Breedlove's Spirit of America wasn't just a machine, it was a cultural milestone. For a generation raised on space-age dreams, it became a symbol of American ingenuity and audacity. Breedlove would return again and again, chasing even greater speeds into the 90s. His final project was a new generation Spirit of America, which aimed at breaking the sound barrier, but funding and technical hurdles kept it from ever matching his 1965 triumph. Still, his pursuit itself was a testament to a life driven by speed and unfinished dreams. He passed away in 2023 at age 86 as a legend who never stopped chasing the horizon. As for Art Arfons, he stepped away from land speed racing after his near-fatal crash. But he didn't stop. He pivoted to tractor pulling and remained a grassroots hero. A garage genius who proved that raw determination could take you just as far as million-dollar backing. He passed in 2007, leaving behind a legacy of fearless invention and stubborn resolve. But the fire these two lit never died. Their rivalry on the Bonneville Salt Flats inspired more than just headlines. It lit the fuse for future speed chasers. In the 1980s, Thrust 2 from the UK pushed the land speed record past 633 miles per hour. Then came Thrust SSC, which in 1997 shattered the sound barrier at 763 miles per hour with RAF pilot Andy Green at the controls. It was a feat made possible because Breedlove and Arfons proved decades earlier that jet-powered cars could survive at those limits. And the story didn't stop with men. In 2019, Jessie Combs became the fastest woman on 4 wheels, reaching 522.783 miles per hour before her tragic accident. She carried the same fire, the same obsession that Breedlove and Arfons had sparked. Their story is now a legend. It is told in garages, whispered in workshops, etched in salt and steel. Not just because of the technology, but because of their hearts. Today, the Bonneville Salt Flats remains sacred ground. So this was the 600 miles per hour rivalry, a battle of speed, grit, and pure obsession. When two men dare to outrun death and don't look back. What did you think about this legendary rivalry? And what extreme record should we cover next? Let us know in the comments. Each one of them is read. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this ride, hit like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next wild record.